Captain Rylan Voss stood at the edge of the ship's hatch, staring at the alien world below. The planet was rough and unwelcoming, with jagged mountains piercing the sky and dense, tangled forests that looked like something out of a nightmare. It was the kind of place explorers dreaded, but for Rylan it was just another day. The human crew had landed on this remote planet to search for resources that could help fuel the war effort back home. But what they had found was far more dangerous than any of them had expected. Rylan had been briefed on the dangers of the planet before landing. The reports mentioned predator dragons, massive creatures with razor-sharp claws, scales as tough as steel, and eyes that glowed with an intelligent malice. They were known for hunting in packs, but rumors said that they could take on even the largest creatures alone. And yet, standing outside his ship, Rylan felt calm. He had faced danger before, and nothing about this planet was going to change that. Behind him, his crew, 2 engineers, a xenobiologist, and a few security personnel, watched nervously from inside the ship. They had all heard the stories of the predator dragons, but none of them had ever seen one in person. For most of them, the idea of an encounter with such a beast was enough to make their hearts race. "Captain, you sure about this?" Elena Thorne, the xenobiologist, asked, her voice laced with doubt. She had spent her entire career studying alien life forms, but this was different. What if it's not just the blood of some animal you're smelling? What if it's us? Rylan didn't answer right away. He simply walked down the ship's ramp and stood in the middle of the dusty, barren landscape. His boots crunched against the rocky ground. A thick fog rose from the surface, making it difficult to see too far ahead. But Rylan knew what was coming. From the corner of his eye, he saw the massive shadow. The air shifted, a sudden gust that felt too heavy, too dense to be natural. It was the dragon. The creature was huge, larger than any terrestrial animal Rylan had ever encountered. Its wings, folded at its sides, looked like they could span the width of the ship. Its scales shimmered like polished steel, and its eyes, those glowing yellow eyes, were locked onto Rylan, sharp with hunger. The dragon's nose flared, sniffing the air as it assessed the situation. It could smell blood, and Rylan, standing perfectly still, knew it could sense his heartbeat, his every movement. But he wasn't afraid. For a moment, the crew inside the ship held their breath. Everyone knew what was happening. The dragon had spotted them. They were being hunted. But instead of drawing his weapon or giving any sign of panic, Rylan simply reached into his bag and pulled out a food ration pack. He tore open the packaging slowly, his actions deliberate and calm. The smell of the processed meal was faint, but enough to make the dragon pause. "Relax, it's just my lunch," Rylan said, his voice steady. He spoke to the dragon as if it were a curious animal, and for a moment no one could believe what they were hearing. Was he seriously talking to it? The creature's nostrils flared as it circled, its large body blocking the sun and casting a long shadow over Rylan. The dragon was still clearly assessing the human, its instincts screaming that something was wrong. Its eyes flicked to the food in Rylan's hand, the smell clearly reaching its sensitive nose. "What is he doing?" One of the security officers whispered from the ship's interior. "Is he insane?" Elena had her hand on the comms panel, ready to call for a retreat, but she hesitated. She had never seen anything like this before. The predator dragon should have attacked by now. It should have swooped down and crushed Rylan with a single swipe of its claw, and yet the creature seemed confused. Rylan smiled slightly, his voice still calm and collected. "You know, I've seen dragons like you before. You're always so quick to hunt, always so eager to tear into your prey. But you're not looking for food. You're looking for something else. A reason, maybe. Or just a challenge." The dragon, circling above him now, seemed to hesitate. It tilted its head, studying Rylan in a way that felt almost thoughtful. The tension in the air thickened as both sides seemed to be caught in a strange standoff. The dragon's eyes narrowed as if it were weighing its options. Rylan took a slow, deliberate step forward. His voice, now softer, was barely more than a whisper. "I'm not here to fight, and I'm not here to run. So how about you take a look and decide if I'm worth your time?" The creature's response wasn't what anyone expected. With a low, almost confused growl, the dragon slowly folded its wings against its body and landed on the ground in front of Rylan. It didn't lunge or swipe. It simply stood there, its enormous body towering over him. The air seemed to tremble with the weight of its presence, but Rylan didn't flinch. Instead, he slowly lowered his hand to his side and pulled out a small, handheld scanner. He activated it, and it buzzed to life with a soft beep. The dragon's eyes followed the device curiously, the intelligence behind them apparent. For a moment it seemed to regard Rylan with a quiet respect. Inside the ship, the crew watched in stunned silence, unable to process what they were witnessing. Was the dragon truly understanding Rylan? Was it simply sizing him up? Or was there something else going on that no one could explain? Rylan, still standing tall and unafraid, smiled at the dragon. "See, told you. Nothing to worry about." The creature let out a deep rumble, its enormous head dipping down toward him in a gesture that might have been respect. Or maybe just curiosity. Either way, it seemed clear. Rylan wasn't just another prey item. He was different. And for reasons no one could understand, the dragon wasn't attacking. Behind the protective walls of the ship, Elena Thorne's voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, we need to get moving." "This isn't safe." Rylan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood there, calmly facing the creature. "No rush," he finally said, his voice steady. "We're going to be fine. Just give it a minute." And for the first time since landing on this hostile planet, Rylan felt something that no one had expected, a sense of peace. Even in the face of a massive predator, Rylan knew one thing: he was going to be just fine. After all, he had faced worse. As the massive predator dragon continued to stand over Captain Rylan Voss, the rest of the crew inside the ship could hardly believe what they were witnessing. They had seen the footage, heard the stories, and yet nothing could have prepared them for this moment. The dragon, known for its merciless attacks, wasn't lunging at Rylan. Instead, it was waiting, watching, almost as if it was trying to understand him. Inside the ship, Elena Thorne, the xenobiologist, stared at the monitors, her face a mixture of confusion and fascination. "I don't understand," she muttered to herself, glancing at the screen. "Dragons don't behave like this. They attack first, then think later. Why isn't it attacking him?" The rest of the crew was equally stunned. The security officers were armed and ready, their fingers twitching nervously on their weapons. They had trained for moments like this, for the worst-case scenarios. But this was different. Their captain, Rylan, had always been confident, but never this calm. Not even when facing something as terrifying as the predator dragon. Rylan, meanwhile, was standing perfectly still, watching the creature before him with quiet attention. The dragon's massive head was only a few feet from him now, its sharp golden eyes narrowing as it studied him. There was no hostility in the dragon's gaze, only confusion, and a sort of silent curiosity. "What's your plan, Captain?" one of the crew members finally asked over the comms. It was Lieutenant Adam, a young officer who had seen enough battles to know how dangerous a creature like this could be. Rylan's voice crackled through the communication system, calm as ever. "Plan? Just relax. This isn't the time for panic." "You're crazy, sir," Adam responded. "That thing could tear you apart in seconds." Elena, still watching in disbelief, adjusted the camera feed. "I think it's trying to figure him out," she said quietly. "It's like the dragon doesn't know what to make of him." The dragon's nostrils flared again, and for a moment it took a step back. The air between them felt thick with tension, but still, Rylan did not move. His steady breathing and relaxed posture seemed to be working in his favor. The dragon, despite its instincts to strike, hesitated. Its eyes flicked to Rylan's face and then to the food ration in his hand. It was almost as if the creature was unsure whether to attack or simply leave. Elena frowned as the ship's sensors beeped softly. The dragon's heart rate had slowed. It wasn't acting like a predator anymore. In fact, it seemed confused. "How is that possible?" Elena asked, more to herself than to anyone else. "That's not how predators work. They don't hesitate. Not for this long." Rylan took a deep breath, sensing that the moment was still delicate. He lowered the ration pack and carefully held it out, offering it to the dragon as though it were a peace offering. It seemed like a strange thing to do, even to Rylan, but he knew better than anyone that sometimes the simplest gestures were the most effective. "Here, big guy," Rylan murmured, his voice low and soothing. "This is all I've got. You want it? You can have it." The dragon's glowing eyes shifted from Rylan to the ration pack. It slowly leaned forward, sniffing the air once more. The smell of food was faint to a human, but to the dragon it was likely stronger, sharper. The massive creature stepped closer, its body shifting with each movement. It was still cautious, but something had changed. It wasn't on the attack. It was intrigued. Rylan stood his ground, showing no fear, even as the dragon's massive form loomed above him. His calm demeanor seemed to have an effect on the beast. The dragon's wings, which had once been spread wide in a display of power, now lay folded against its body, almost as if it had dropped its guard. On board the ship, the crew could only watch, their mouths dry, their hearts racing. They had never seen anything like this. They had seen dragons in action, tearing through enemies with lethal precision, but this was something entirely different. Rylan had somehow managed to calm the beast without lifting a finger. There was no explanation for it. No one could understand how the captain had done it. Captain, Elena's voice broke through the silence, full of wonder. I think it's trusting you. I'm just giving it what it wants, Rylan replied simply, still holding out the ration pack. He wasn't pretending to have all the answers. It wants to know if I'm a threat or not. And I'm not. The dragon's eyes studied him as if processing his words, and then incredibly it took a step back. Rylan's heart skipped a beat. Was it going to leave? Was the danger finally over? But instead of attacking, the dragon lowered its massive head toward the ground, almost as if it were bowing. The gesture was subtle but unmistakable. In that one moment, the dragon seemed to acknowledge Rylan as something more than just prey. It was an odd gesture of respect. Rylan allowed himself a small smile. See, he said, addressing the crew. Nothing to worry about. You just have to understand them. His words, calm and confident, were enough to ease some of the tension among the crew, but not all of them were convinced. Lieutenant Adam was still on edge. I don't care how well you know these creatures, sir. That thing could turn on us in an instant. Rylan turned to face the ship's entrance, his voice now more serious. I'm not saying it won't, but right now it's not interested in fighting. It's interested in figuring out if we're worth its time. Elena took a deep breath, still processing the strange event unfolding before her. This doesn't make sense. Dragons are supposed to be mindless killers, but that one, she shook her head. It's like it has some sort of intelligence, and not just animal intelligence. There's something more there. Rylan's eyes met Elena's, and for a moment there was a flicker of understanding between them. That's the thing about humans, he said quietly. We don't just survive. We adapt, we learn, and sometimes that's all it takes to survive the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. The dragon, seemingly satisfied with its inspection, gave a low rumbling sound. It wasn't a growl, nor was it a warning. It was a soft, almost peaceful noise, like a contented sigh, and then, as if deciding that Rylan was no longer a threat, it turned and began to walk away, its massive form disappearing into the dense fog that covered the ground. Rylan didn't move for a moment, watching the dragon's departure. Then slowly he walked back to the ship, his expression thoughtful. All right, he said into the comms. Let's get moving. We're not out of danger yet, but I think we've made a friend. Let's keep moving forward. Inside the ship, the crew exchanged glances, some still skeptical, but all of them knew one thing for sure. They had just witnessed something extraordinary. And as they prepared to continue their mission on this dangerous planet, they realized that with Rylan at the helm, anything was possible. The days following the encounter with the predator dragon were strange. The crew of the explorer ship found themselves on edge, constantly looking over their shoulders as if expecting the massive creature to return. But Rylan, as usual, was calm. He moved through the ship with the same steady confidence, going about his work as if nothing had changed. But the crew couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Elena Thorne, the xenobiologist, was the most affected. She had spent her entire life studying alien species, trying to understand how their biology and behavior worked. Yet nothing in her research had ever suggested that a creature like the dragon could act the way it had. She found herself staring out of the ship's observation window, her mind racing. Rylan, as always, seemed unaffected by the mystery. He had handled the dragon with such ease, as if he knew exactly how to deal with it. The way he had stood there offering the ration pack and then simply talking to the beast, it was as if he had done it 100 times before. But that wasn't possible. There was no record of humans ever encountering creatures like the predator dragon. There was no official training on how to handle something like that. And yet Rylan had done it effortlessly. One evening, after the crew had finished their meal and the sun began to set over the jagged cliffs of the alien world, Elena approached Rylan. She found him sitting by himself, staring at the stars above. His expression was unreadable, his posture relaxed. Captain, Elena began, her voice uncertain. I need to ask you something. Rylan didn't look up immediately. He simply nodded, signaling for her to continue. How do you do it? She asked, sitting down beside him. How do you stay so calm in situations like that? The dragon, it could have killed us all, and yet you stood there like it was nothing. Rylan took a slow breath, his eyes still on the stars. It's not about staying calm. It's about understanding the situation. Elena raised an eyebrow. Understanding? That dragon was a deadly predator. Its instincts were screaming at it to attack, and yet it didn't. Why? Why did it listen to you? Rylan paused for a moment, then finally turned to face her. His eyes were serious, but there was something else behind them. Something that Elena couldn't quite place. I've dealt with worse, he said quietly. That dragon? It wasn't just an animal. It was intelligent. It wasn't just looking for food. It was looking for something else. A challenge, maybe. A reason to act. When you understand that, it's easier to know what to do. Elena frowned, not fully understanding. But how do you know that? How do you know that it wasn't just going to kill you? Because I've faced creatures like it before, Rylan said, his voice steady. Not dragons, but other predators. Creatures that are dangerous but also smart. They don't just attack because they're hungry. They attack because they're curious. And sometimes, if you can outthink them, you can survive. Elena stared at him in shock. You've faced creatures like the dragon before? But where? When? Rylan didn't answer right away. He stood up, dusting off his uniform as he looked out at the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and orange. It's not something I talk about, he said softly. But yes, I've been in situations like that. I was part of a special operations team, a group of soldiers trained to deal with the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Elena's eyes widened. You mean, you're some kind of soldier? But you're a captain. You lead exploration missions. You're not supposed to be a fighter. Rylan gave her a small, wry smile. I'm both. I wasn't always a captain. Before I took on this role, I was part of a unit that hunted the galaxy's most dangerous predators. Our job was to neutralize threats to humanity, things that were too dangerous to leave alive. Elena was stunned. But why? Why would you go from hunting these creatures to leading exploration missions? Rylan's expression grew distant. Because I wanted to do more. I wanted to help humanity expand, to explore new worlds, to find resources that could help us grow. But I couldn't forget what I learned during my time in the field. I learned how to deal with threats. And sometimes that knowledge is more important than any weapon or technology. Elena sat in silence, taking in what he had said. She had always admired Rylan for his leadership skills, his ability to remain calm under pressure. But now she realized there was so much more to him than she had known. He wasn't just a captain. He was someone who had faced death head-on. Someone who had learned how to outsmart the galaxy's deadliest creatures. Does anyone else know about your past? She asked, her voice soft. Rylan shook his head. No, it's not something I talk about. But now you know. And it's not just the dragons. There are other creatures, things that humanity hasn't even begun to understand. But we will. That's why we're here. To learn, to adapt, to survive. Elena nodded slowly. It made sense now. Rylan's calm in the face of danger wasn't just bravery. It was experience. It was knowledge of how to deal with things most people could never imagine. I think I understand, she said quietly. But why did you choose to leave that life? Why not keep hunting these creatures? Rylan's expression softened. Because in the end, it wasn't the hunting that mattered. It was what we were trying to protect. Humanity we're not here to destroy. We're here to grow. And sometimes growth means learning to live alongside the things that threaten us. As the silence between them grew, Elena realized that there was much more to Captain Rylan Voss than she had ever imagined. He wasn't just a leader. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a man who had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer, and had come out stronger for it. And now that strength was helping them all survive. The planet's vast wilderness had begun to feel less like an alien world and more like home to the crew of the Explorer. Over the last few days, the crew had been scanning the planet's surface, searching for any signs of valuable resources. But despite their initial tension, they had found no other dangerous creatures. The predator dragon, which had once seemed like the ultimate threat, now felt like a distant memory. Still, the encounter left a lingering unease in the crew. They couldn't shake the image of that massive, intelligent creature circling around Captain Rylan, waiting, watching. It had respected him. No, more than that. It had seemed to trust him. Rylan had insisted that the planet wasn't as dangerous as it appeared. He had confidence in his ability to deal with any threats, no matter how fierce. But Elena wasn't sure. She couldn't stop thinking about the dragon's strange behavior, and she had to know more. One evening, as the crew gathered in the mess hall to discuss their findings, Elena couldn't hold back any longer. "Captain," she began, her voice low, "I think I've figured it out. The dragon wasn't just curious about you. It wasn't just confused. It was testing you." Rylan looked up from his datapad, raising an eyebrow. "Testing me? How do you figure that?" Elena sat down across from him, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. The way it moved around you, the way it didn't attack, it wasn't looking for a meal. It was looking for something else. It wanted to see how you would react, to see if you were a threat. And when you didn't show fear, when you just stood there. She trailed off, her mind racing. "I think the dragon respected you. It was like it was acknowledging you as an equal." Rylan nodded slowly, considering her words. "You're right," he said after a moment. "That dragon wasn't acting like a typical predator. It wasn't driven by hunger alone. It was intelligent, and it wanted to see if I was a challenge. Creatures like that don't attack out of instinct alone. They're looking for something more." Elena leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "So you've seen this before? You've encountered creatures like this?" Rylan's expression darkened. "Yes, I've seen them before. Not dragons, but other predators, alien species, things that don't just follow instincts. They have strategies, motivations. They want something from you. And when you understand that, when you can meet them halfway, you can survive." Elena was fascinated. She had spent years studying alien creatures, but she had never encountered anything that acted with such intelligence. "But why would the dragon choose to let us go? Why not just kill us?" Rylan leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant as he stared out the window of the mess hall. "Because not every predator is interested in killing. Some want respect. They want to know if you're worth their time. That dragon, it wasn't just trying to hunt us. It was trying to understand us. It had no idea what we were. But when it saw I wasn't afraid, when it saw I wasn't just another victim." He shook his head. "It knew we weren't easy prey." Elena took in his words, feeling a growing sense of awe. "So you've learned to deal with creatures like this?" Rylan met her gaze, his expression softening. "Yes and no. I've learned to survive. I've learned that sometimes it's not the fight you win that matters. It's how you approach it. Some creatures are just trying to figure you out. Others are testing you to see if you're worthy of respect." As the conversation continued, Elena couldn't help but think about how Rylan's past experiences had shaped his leadership style. He wasn't just a captain because of his skills or his rank. He was a captain because he understood creatures, both human and alien. He understood how to adapt, how to think, how to survive. The next day, as the crew made their way deeper into the planet's wilderness, something unexpected happened. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and a low, rumbling growl echoed through the trees. The crew immediately went into high alert, weapons raised, eyes scanning the dense forest. Rylan stood at the front of the group, his posture calm and composed. Elena, still feeling the weight of their previous conversation, couldn't help but glance at him. "What is that?" one of the crew members whispered. Rylan raised a hand to signal for silence. He had heard the growl too, and it was unlike anything they had encountered so far. It wasn't the sound of a dragon, it was deeper, more guttural almost. Animalistic. Without a word, Rylan began to walk forward, his boots crunching against the underbrush. Elena hesitated for only a moment before following. She trusted him. There was something about the way he moved, the way he faced danger that gave her confidence. As they moved deeper into the forest, the growling grew louder. It wasn't coming from any direction in particular. It was echoing all around them. It was as if the creature, or whatever it was surrounding them. Then, without warning, a massive shadow broke through the trees. Elena gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. The creature that emerged from the forest was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was covered in thick spiked fur, with large claws that could easily rip through metal. Its eyes were glowing red, and its mouth was filled with sharp teeth that gleamed in the dim light. The creature growled again, its body low to the ground as it sized them up. Rylan stood his ground, his eyes focused on the creature, not moving an inch. "Stay calm," he said softly to the crew, his voice steady. It's testing us, just like the dragon. Don't show fear. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't believe it. This wasn't just a dangerous animal. It was another predator, another creature that was testing them. And once again, Ryland's calmness was their only defense. The creature snarled, but Ryland didn't flinch. He took a step forward, his hand raised slowly. We're not here to fight, he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. We're just passing through. If you want to fight, then we'll fight. But we don't need to. For a long moment, the creature simply stared at him. Its red eyes locked onto Ryland's, and then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature stepped back, its growl fading into the distance. The crew stood frozen, shocked by what they had just witnessed. The creature hadn't attacked. It had tested them just like the dragon had, and just like before, Ryland had stood firm, never showing fear, never backing down. When the creature was gone, Elena turned to Ryland. How do you do it? She whispered. How do you know what to say to them? Ryland smiled, his expression a little softer than usual. It's not about what I say. It's about understanding them. Every creature is different, but they all want the same thing. Respect. Once you know that, the rest is easy. The crew of the Explorer had learned to trust Captain Ryland Voss. Even though they had only been on this planet for a few days, it felt like they had been through much more. The encounters with the predator dragon and the strange, growling creature had shaken them, but Ryland's calm, confident leadership had kept them together. Still, as they made their way deeper into the heart of the planet, Elena couldn't help but wonder, how much longer could Ryland's calmness last? Would there be another predator, even worse than the others? She knew the captain had experience, but even he couldn't face every challenge alone. The deeper they went into the dense jungle, the more it felt like they were being watched. The sounds of wildlife surrounded them, but the silence of the Explorer's crew spoke volumes. No one said much anymore. They all trusted Ryland, but fear was still present, just beneath the surface. The unknown stretched before them. We're getting closer, Ryland said, his voice breaking the silence. He didn't need to look at the map. He had known the direction all along. There was something instinctive about his sense of where they were going. Keep your eyes open. I'm not sure what's ahead, but we'll make it through. Elena followed him, still thinking about the conversation they had had days ago. She had never known anyone like him. His ability to stay calm and think clearly, even when the most terrifying creatures on the planet were just a few steps away, was something Elena could never quite understand. But she had learned to trust it. In Ryland, there was a confidence that was almost contagious. As they trudged through the underbrush, they came upon a clearing. In the center was a large ancient structure, ruins long forgotten, sitting silently in the jungle. It looked like an old temple, its stone walls covered in moss and vines. The crew stopped, their breath catching as they gazed at it. Ryland stepped forward, his eyes scanning the ruin. He didn't seem surprised by the discovery. It was as if he had been expecting it all along. This is it, he said. The artifact should be inside. Elena raised an eyebrow. An artifact? You never mentioned anything about that before. Ryland turned to face her, his expression serious. I wasn't sure how to explain it. The artifact is powerful, more powerful than anything we've ever encountered. It could change the future of humanity if we can get to it first. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had come to this planet for resources, not to find a weapon or ancient technology. They were explorers, not soldiers, but the determination in Ryland's eyes made it clear that this mission was more important than they had realized. As they approached the entrance to the temple, the ground shook again. This time it wasn't a predator that had caused the disturbance. It was something much more dangerous. The walls of the temple cracked and an ancient machine deep within the structure hummed to life. Elena, stay back, Ryland ordered as he stepped forward. This could be dangerous. Before Elena could respond, the machine roared to life, its lights flickering, casting strange shadows across the walls. It was a defense system, clearly built to protect whatever lay inside. The air around them crackled with energy as the machine activated. The crew had no weapons powerful enough to destroy the machine. The only thing they had was Ryland's ability to think quickly. I've seen something like this before, he muttered. He didn't look scared. He was completely calm, as if he had been expecting this. It's an old security system. If we can disable the power, the machine will stop. Rylan moved swiftly, making his way toward the control panel embedded in the stone walls of the temple. As he did, the machine's energy blasts lit up the surrounding area. The crew ducked behind stone pillars, avoiding the blast as they tried to stay out of the line of fire. "Cover me," Rylan shouted. His voice was steady even under pressure. Elena hesitated. It was one thing to follow Rylan's calm in the face of a predator, but this was different. This was an ancient defense system, designed to kill anyone who dared to approach. Still, she trusted Rylan. She grabbed a nearby piece of cover and aimed her weapon at the machine, ready to provide whatever protection she could. Rylan reached the control panel, his hands flying over the ancient technology as he worked quickly. Sparks flew as he worked to disable the power. The crew watched, unsure if they could trust the captain's experience in this situation. A final loud snap echoed through the clearing as the power to the machine finally cut off. The energy blasts stopped and the room grew quiet again. Rylan straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It's done. Now let's get inside." The crew slowly emerged from their cover, their nerves still on edge. They had been so close to being killed by that machine, but once again, Rylan had kept them safe. As they entered the temple, Elena's mind raced. She had seen Rylan take down predators, outsmart ancient machines, and lead them through dangers that would have broken most people. She had always thought that humanity's strength came from its numbers, from its ability to fight back when it was pushed into a corner. But now, she was beginning to see something different in Rylan. It wasn't just that Rylan could survive, it was that he understood the creatures, the dangers, and the challenges they faced. He knew how to think in ways that others didn't. He knew how to adapt, to find solutions even when there seemed to be no way out. As they moved deeper into the temple, they found what they were looking for, an ancient device glowing softly with energy. The artifact was exactly as Rylan had described. It was a powerful energy source, capable of providing limitless power, or, in the wrong hands, it could destroy entire civilizations. Rylan stood before the artifact, his expression serious. The crew gathered around him, their eyes wide as they realized what they had uncovered. This was more than just a mission. This was a turning point for humanity. "This artifact is humanity's future," Rylan said, his voice low. "It could change everything for us, but we must use it carefully." The crew stood silently, absorbing his words. They knew that the future of humanity now rested in their hands. As they began to prepare for the journey back, Elena couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and respect for Rylan. He wasn't just a captain. He wasn't just a soldier. He was something more. He was the person who had led them through impossible odds, who had kept them calm, who had shown them the true strength of humanity. It wasn't just in their ability to fight, but in their ability to understand, adapt, and survive. "Let's get out of here," Rylan said, breaking the silence. "We've got work to do." And with that, the crew began their journey back to the ship, ready to return home, but not as the same people who had landed on this planet. They were different now. They had seen the strength of humanity, and they had seen it through the eyes of their captain,